began with the glint of chrome and the roar of a crowd at CPAC on February 20th, 2025. Elon Musk strode onto the stage, clutching a polished chainsaw engraved with the slogan "Viva la libertad, carajo," a gift from Argentine President Javier Milei. Hoisting it overhead, Musk declared it the chainsaw for bureaucracy, a symbol of the radical new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, that he'd been tapped to lead. Moments later, he promised something even sharper: to shear a full $1 trillion from Washington's budget in just a few short years. Reporters gasped. Conservative influencers hailed him as the savior of small government. Detractors rolled their eyes at what they called Silicon Valley theater. Still, the pledge stuck, repeated in every headline from AP to Reuters, as proof that Musk, now an official special government employee, limited to 130 working days, meant to carve deeper than any reformer since Reagan. Inside the Capitol, enthusiasm cooled fast. Congressional scorekeepers warned that Musk's math relied on closing agencies Congress had no intention of defunding. Lobbyists for defense, agriculture, and veterans groups lined up to protect their slices of the pie, while some cabinet secretaries quietly questioned whether DOGE even had legal authority to implement mass layoffs without legislation. Yet the spectacle worked. Polls showed a spike in public support for draining the swamp, and overnight, Musk became the administration's headline act, a billionaire brandishing a chainsaw, promising to do what generations of politicians never could. Whether he could actually deliver was another story, one that would soon hinge on a towering wall of receipts and a string of accounting surprises that nobody in the Oval Office saw coming. The $170 billion illusion. The victory lap came fast. Within 70 days of launch, DOGE plastered a giant wall of receipts in the West Wing. Hundreds of glossy pages bragging about $170 billion in federal savings. Staffers posed for selfies. Musk called it efficiency porn. Reporters ate it up, splashing the number across front pages as proof the chainsaw was working. But the ink was barely dry before independent auditors started poking holes the size of lunar craters. First, the duplication glitch. Entire line items counted twice because two agencies shared the same vendor code. Then, the vanishing benefits trick. Cutting a veterans outreach program saved $900 million on paper, until the VA had to replace it with a new hotline at triple the cost. And lurking behind those flashy totals was an even bigger asterisk. Non-partisan analysts warned the rapid layoffs and hiring freezes could bleed $135 billion in lost productivity over the next decade. In plain English, the savings might end up in the red. Stories of whiplash firings piled up too. One payroll clerk in Topeka received 3 separate pink slips, each followed by a frantic "oops" email when supervisors realized no one else could unlock her encrypted database. A Seattle USDA scientist spent a week clearing his desk, only to be rehired under a different job title because his research was legally mandated by Congress. Multiply those bureaucratic boomerangs across hundreds of agencies, and the accounting magic started to look like smoke and mirrors. Musk waved off the criticism, tweeting that perfect is the enemy of progress and promising the numbers would balance out over time. The Capitol Hill smelled blood. Budget hawks demanded a formal audit, unions threatened lawsuits, and watchdog groups began mapping every dubious decimal to expose what they dubbed the $170 billion illusion. But the fallout wasn't just on spreadsheets. DOGE's cuts were about to hit real people and real programs in every corner of the country. The numbers on DOGE's wall of receipts didn't bleed. They bled people. Within weeks of the first wave of cuts, food bank managers from Phoenix to Philadelphia reported pallet after pallet of USDA surplus groceries simply stopping. Shelves meant for weekend backpack meal programs sat empty, and volunteers scrambled to crowdfund peanut butter and rice just to keep kids fed. In Missouri, a state-run child abuse prevention hotline went dark for 48 hours after its federal grant vanished overnight. By the time officials patched together emergency dollars, more than 600 calls had rolled to voicemail. Overseas, aid workers in Sudan warned that a sudden freeze on USAID famine relief funds threatened to push tens of thousands closer to starvation. Yet DOGE listed the cut as a tidy $2.4 billion saved. Behind each spreadsheet, victory loomed stories like Mary Delgado's, a single mom in El Paso whose rental assistance voucher evaporated mid-lease. "They told me efficiency was the goal," she said through tears, "but it feels like we're the waste they're trimming." Congressional offices were flooded with similar letters: veterans who lost transportation stipends, ranchers whose drought monitoring satellites went offline, college students whose Pell Grant disbursements shrank without warning. Even staunch fiscal hawks began to whisper that the chainsaw might be hacking indiscriminately, shredding programs that actually saved money in the long run. Yet, inside the West Wing, the mood stayed triumphant. Musk's photo ops continued. The president kept praising the greatest cost cutter in history, and the receipts wall grew another few feet taller. What few outsiders knew was that the backlash brewing beyond the Beltway was about to burst into Washington itself, dragging Musk, DOGE, and the entire trillion-dollar promise into a storm of audits, lawsuits, and political infighting that even a chainsaw might not slice through. If Washington is a stage, Elon Musk spent his 130 allotted days hogging the spotlight. One morning, he was sandwiched between four-star generals in the Situation Room. The next, he was grinning from the jump seat of Air Force One, live streaming the takeoff to 50 million followers. Cabinet secretaries whispered that no civilian since Henry Kissinger had enjoyed such unfettered access. Yet Musk breezed through metal detectors with the casual confidence of someone who owned the building. Photos surfaced of a crimson Model S parked on the south lawn. Secret Service puzzled, Musk laughing that the charging cable is longer than the deficit. He even brought family to work. Cameras caught his 5-year-old, nicknamed Lil X, toddling through the Oval Office, clutching a toy rocket, moments before reportedly clocking Dad hard enough to leave the Shiner Twitter dissected for days. The bruise did nothing to slow Musk's sprint. Media briefings, midnight Slack messages to agency heads, surprise factory tours where he promised displaced federal engineers a seat on the Starship. But behind closed doors, staff accountants muttered that the stopwatch on Musk's 130-day limit didn't always run during weekend junkets or late-night Zooms from Boca Chica. Rumors spread of shadow days, logged off the books, a grey zone no one dared audit, while the president kept calling him the greatest cost cutter alive. Yet even Musk's VIP pass couldn't shield him from the brewing economic storm. A federal court had just yanked the rug out from under Trump's emergency tariffs, and the trade war backlash threatened to torch every dollar DOGE claimed to save. Just as Musk's chainsaw fever was peaking, trade courts pulled the fire alarm. A 3-judge panel ruled that President Trump's sweeping 10% tariffs, slapped on nearly every US trading partner under emergency powers, were flat out illegal. Markets jolted, importers cheered, for 24 hours. Then the US Court of Appeals hit pause, reinstating the duties while it weighed the administration's appeal. Trump crowed that the tariffs are so important, they'd rescued the nation from peril. But behind the resolute desk, aides saw a math problem that could nuke DOGE's brag sheet. If higher import costs rippled through the economy, consumer prices could erase every penny of the touted $170 billion in savings, and maybe add billions in new deficits. Economists at Brookings warned the tariff bounce back alone might cost households an extra $1,200 a year, a stealth tax that dwarfed many of DOGE's headline cuts. Meanwhile, whispers from Shanghai to Berlin hinted at retaliation aimed squarely at Tesla's supply chain. Battery minerals, software licenses, even docking rights for Starlink ground stations. Musk, normally a tweet storm in human form, went conspicuously silent. Some insiders claim he pleaded with trade officials to carve out exemptions for EV components. Others say he drafted a midnight memo arguing the tariffs, not entitlement programs, were the real bloat. Either way, the collision course was set. Musk's crusade for lean government now hinged on a policy that could bloat prices, spook investors, and torch the very savings he'd promised to deliver. And while the tariff battle raged, Congress quietly pushed through a monster spending package that threatened to turn DOGE's chainsaw into a toothpick, igniting the first public rift between the billionaire cost cutter and the president who hired him. 3 days before his 130-day clock hit zero, Musk did something no one in the West Wing expected. He went on national TV and questioned the president's favorite trophy bill. Sitting under studio lights for CBS Sunday Morning, he raised an eyebrow and quipped, "A law can be big or it can be beautiful. I'm not convinced it can be both." Viewers heard a polite laugh. Staffers heard a detonation. That same night, a clip looped across X and cable news, framed against a staggering new report from the Congressional Budget Office. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act would add $3.8 trillion to the deficit by 2034, nearly wiping out DOGE's projected lifetime savings in one stroke. Inside the White House, phones lit up. Donors begged for clarity. Conservative talk show hosts demanded loyalty pledges. And a stunned press secretary tried to spin Musk's remarks as spirited policy debate among friends. Yet sources whispered that Trump hadn't returned Musk's last 2 calls, and the president's social media feed, normally a fountain of praise, went strangely silent about the greatest cost cutter. Meanwhile, Hill insiders claimed a block of freshman representatives, emboldened by Musk's on-air dissent, were drafting amendments to claw back the bill's pricier tax breaks. Lobbyists lined up on both sides, turning the corridors outside the Rules Committee into a buzzing bazaar of promises and threats. For the first time since brandishing his chainsaw at CPAC, Musk found himself framed not as the hero slashing red tape, but as a potential spoiler standing between the administration and its signature victory lap. Yet, even as pundits predicted an irreversible rupture, Oval Office aides spotted Musk's name on an internal calendar, booked for a private consult just 1 week after his official departure. Was the feud mere theatre, or the opening salvo in a power struggle that would outlive his 130-day tenure? One thing was certain. Whether as insider or outsider, the billionaire wasn't finished poking holes in Washington's math, and Washington wasn't finished trying to sharpen or silence his chainsaw. Because rumours were already swirling, the Musk's next move would test the very rules meant to keep departed officials at arm's length. The official send-off looked final. Musk handed in his badge, snapped a farewell selfie by the wall of receipts, and rolled out of the West Wing in that same red Model S. Yet by sunrise Monday, staffers swore his profile icon was lighting up DOGE's private Slack, issuing midnight comments on budget memos purely as a citizen. Technically, the ethics rules say a departed special employee must keep a 3-year distance from projects he personally shaped, but nobody at OGE anticipated a billionaire who'd built half the system's back end. Hill watchdogs are asking whether a man who can remote edit a hiring-free spreadsheet still counts as off-boarded. At least 2 unions have drafted lawsuits claiming his ghost advice violates labor law. Meanwhile, a PAC's called Run Efficiently registered in Delaware, its website hinting at a 2028 third-party bid to finish the trillion-dollar cut. Insiders whisper the donor list includes crypto whales, space launch rivals, and a pair of disgruntled cabinet alumni. Congress, wary of being upstaged again, is hustling to lock DOGE's surviving cuts into statute before Musk, or the courts, undo them. One draft bill would freeze the task force's playbook in place, but bar external consultants from touching live databases. Translation: keep the chainsaw, lose the lumberjack. In the end, Elon Musk's 130-day sprint through Washington left a trail of headlines, half-tallied ledgers, and a government still arguing with itself. He promised a $1 trillion trim, flashed a wall boasting $170 billion in savings, and walked away just as auditors warned the net result could dip below zero. Tariffs, court fights, and a monster spending bill now threaten to turn his chainsaw into a boomerang, while food banks and aid groups count the cost in emptied shelves and unanswered calls. Yet for every critic tallying the damage, a supporter insists DOGE showed reform is possible, if you swing hard enough. So what sticks? Maybe it's the lesson that slashing bureaucracy isn't a clean cut, but a messy experiment with real lives on the test bench. Maybe it's the uneasy fact that one billionaire can still rattle the Capitol more than 1,000 committee hearings combined. Or maybe it's the open question we all have to answer. When efficiency clashes with empathy, which side should win? Drop your verdict below, heroic reform or costly cosplay, and tell us how you'd balance the books without gutting the people behind them. Hit subscribe if you want to see where the receipts land next, because this ledger is far from closed.